Hello and welcome to How to Think Like a Science Fiction Writer. My name is Kristine Kathryn Rusch and I am a Hugo Award winning editor and writer. I've also hit bestseller lists all over the world with my science fiction, including the USA Today bestseller list here in the United States and the Times bestseller list in London. I have won awards for my science fiction all around the world, including places outside of the United States like France and Spain and other places. You are in my office right now with me and my little buddy here, who's there to remind me that all science fiction writers are weird and we should not take ourselves very seriously. He lives in my office and, in fact, is here to remind me of that quite often, actually. Usually when a cat puts him in their mouth and runs off with him. He's one of their favorites. Behind me over here, you see the Hugo Award, one of the Hugo Awards that I've won. Directly behind me, you see a bookshelf filled with books that are history, science books that intrigue me, books on the moon, books on Mars, books on forensic pathology, books on the way that the human body works, all the kinds of things I'm researching right now, including some books on economics, because I'm doing a big economics series of short stories that haven't seen the light of day yet, but will soon. The globe you see in the back is not a globe of Earth, it's a globe of the moon. And I use it from my retrieval artist novels. That's one of the best known series that I do. It is, depending on when you watch this, it's either up to 12 or 13 novels by now. They are murder mysteries and other kinds of adventure stories set on the moon. In the retrieval artist universe, there are aliens, like the little guy on the corner right here with me. The other series that I write is the diving universe, which is more archaeology and stuff in space, and that has no aliens in it. You'll hear me talk about both of those series as this lecture goes on. The reason I decided to do this lecture is because in June of 2013 I taught a science fiction writing course for professional writers. These people have had many publications, and yet they couldn't seem to crack the science fiction market. It didn't take me long to figure out why. It was because when they thought about science fiction, they thought about every trope they'd already seen. So they wrote Star Trek or they wrote Star Wars and tried to masquerade it as their own stuff. And it's not. It's very different. And thinking like a science fiction writer requires you to go into the weirder sides of what you do and what you think about and how you approach the world. There is no right or wrong in science fiction because you're making it up, which is the first reason I ever went into science fiction in the first place. And then I got scared by it because in 1985, I went to the Clarion Writers Workshop. And I was told there that I couldn't write science fiction, not by the instructors, but by the other students. They told me I didn't have enough of a science background. They told me I didn't have a scientific brain. And they told me I simply did not have the skills. Now, from that class, me and a handful of other people, about 3, have gone on to be science fiction writers, none of whom were the people who told me I couldn't write science fiction. But had I listened to them, I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you. It's different being a science fiction writer than it is being a scientist. You don't have to know math. You don't have to know any of all that stuff. You just need to have good resources, and you need to be able to think what if. So this class, this lecture, is going to teach you the rudimentary things on how to think about what if and how to approach science fiction writing as opposed to other kinds of fiction writing. Before we go any farther, if you haven't already seen my lecture called How to Write a Short Story, the Basics, you need to watch it. If you haven't watched it, you can go ahead with this one, but I would suggest that you actually pause this one and go watch that one, because some of the stuff I refer to in there is going to have an impact on what I talk to you about here. I'm going to assume you already know all that stuff. So go watch that, and if you haven't already, and if you have, you might want to use your codes to refresh yourself on what we're talking about. And let's take a little moment right here, and we'll move on to we're past the introductory material, and we'll move into the next stage of how to think like a science fiction writer.